my Camino, my first experience of the Camino took place 40 years ago. So as you can imagine, a great deal has changed since then. And I didn't meet another pilgrim until I got down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port and met a Dutch pilgrim, and he was on his own. And after I met him and he was stopping there, I was halfway across Spain before I met two Spanish pilgrims. I was very fortunate in that I met a lot of the real pioneers who were instrumental in getting things going in those days. You know, a lot of people who were real pioneers in those days. They were the people who were building up the associations of Amigos del Camino, creating places for pilgrims to stay, because in those days there was so little, really. So people that we can all be very, very grateful to.
Hello, pilgrims. Welcome to another episode of the Way to Your Why podcast. And today we have an honor to have with us Laurie Dennett. She is doing a lot of different things. She's a writer, she's an historian, she has a garden on her house, and she has been walking the Camino several times. And we are going to be learning a lot from her about, I believe that her first experience walking the Camino was on 1986. That was the first time that she walked the Camino. And I understand that you walked the Camino from the Notre Dame cathedral. Is that right, Laurie?
No, from Chartres Cathedral. From Chartres.
Chartres Cathedral.
Yeah, not that far away, but about 40 miles from Paris. So, yeah.
Okay.
That's where
thank you for that clarification. And then she was going to be explaining about the different caminos that she has been walking to and all that she does. And then recently we met in one of the gatherings that happened in Canada, and that was organized by American Pilgrims on the Camino and the Canadian Company of Pilgrims. And she was a speaker there. And she was talking about the yellow arrow. That's what I met her. And then it finally ends that we have a common friend that is Jose Manuel from Ocebreiro as well. That's when we start talking about. So today we have her here to talk about all that experience. Thank you, Laurie, for being here. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Camino?
El Camino era para mí una experiencia que me cambió la visión del mundo. Soy de Toronto, de Canadá, pero vivía muchos años en el Reino Unido, en Londres, y estaba bastante harta de vivir en una gran metrópolis, y hace 10 años vine aquí para vivir. Y me encantó la paz y la tranquilidad y la naturaleza. Cuando compré esta casa, di cuenta que podían poner en marcha una idea que era hacer una réplica del laberinto de la Catedral de Chartres, desde donde había empezado mi Camino de Santiago. Cualquier persona que quiere visitarlo y pasar un tiempo en ello, está bienvenido a hacerlo. Pueden sentar allí en el banco y contemplar la vista o recorrer el laberinto. Y esto fue mi pequeño intento de decir gracias a la vida y a Galicia y a todo por el gran privilegio de vivir aquí. Empecé a darme cuenta de la geografía espiritual del camino, ¿no?
etapas muy duras, etapas más fáciles, etapas en que la naturaleza y los habitantes dan a ti y recibes con gratitud. Me parecía otra metáfora de la vida misma, de que tienes que aprender y corresponder. Tu peregrinación es el resto de tu vida. Y el milagro del camino es que cada peregrino que llega a Santiago y entiende esto es convertido por vida, porque no es una cosa que olvidas. Eso es transformador. Tu camino no termina en Santiago. Santiago es donde empieza. Y la vida a que vuelves es realmente tu camino.
Well, my Camino, my first experience of the Camino took place 40 years ago. So as you can imagine, a great deal has changed since then. The Camino, as I first knew it, was still pretty undeveloped and very much in the earliest stage of revival. I didn't meet another pilgrim, having started walking in Chartres on the 30th of March, 1986. I didn't meet another pilgrim until I got down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port and met a Dutch pilgrim, and he was on his own. And after I met him and he was stopping there, I was halfway across Spain before I met two Spanish pilgrims in Castoreriz. And I walked with them on and off to Santiago for the rest of the journey. And we only met two Belgian pilgrims and one English boy in all that time. So, it was very little traveled then. I think we might have, spoken with a couple more, but those were the ones those of us that walked together from Castoreriz. So, and we slept anywhere we could, really. There were very few albergues back then. And I slept in all kinds of places. I slept on somebody's sofa. I slept on a pile of rugs in a parish hall. I spent one night under a tree. It was not at all the way it is now. And I spent one night in the old schoolhouse, the ruined schoolhouse in Rabanal del Camino, the village that became such an important place for me and the members of the Confraternity of St. James only a few years later. And so that was quite an adventure to go back there and turn that, not that building, but turn Rabanal into something approximating what it is today. That was where the process began. So very, very different. But the people were as kindly and careful and caring towards pilgrims then as they are now, even more so perhaps. And I was very fortunate in that I met a lot of the real pioneers who were instrumental in getting things going in those days. I met the man who founded the French Association, the Amis de Chemin de Saint-Jacques, back in 1950, Monsieur de la Coste Meselier. I met Madame de Brille in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, who gave me a credencial. I met Don Francisco Berjuete in Estrella, who started the first Spanish association in 1962. And I met a lot of other people, Don Jose Maria Alonso in San Juan de Ortega, and of course Don Elias Valina, who became a great friend in Osobrero, whose nephew Jose Manuel is. That's how we know each other, our mutual friend, Jose Manuel, and you and I. And then, a lot of people who were real pioneers in those days. They were the people who were building up the associations of Amigos del Camino and building and creating places for pilgrims to stay, because in those days there was so little, really. So people that we can all be very, very grateful to.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. All that history that you just have tell us. And then talking about that first experience that you have, you mentioned that you saw few people, few pilgrims walking. And probably do you remember how many were in total, like 10, 12 people that you see in the whole Camino?
Oh, fewer than 10. Fewer than 10.
Okay.
It was almost funny when you look back from a vantage point of today, where if I go up to Osabrero any time of day, even in the dead of winter, there are probably more pilgrims up there than I saw in the whole time that I was walking. And
Okay.
and I just want to add something about Chartres, why I started from Chartres and not from Notre Dame in Paris, because doing my research beforehand, I found out that the oldest confraternity of all was based in Chartres, 1120. And that was a confraternity, was a group of people who had made the pilgrimage to Santiago from their town, wherever it was, and who then banded together to help others make it. And the one in Chartres was founded in 1120. The one in Paris was about 12 or 15 years later than that. And I thought,
Okay.
well, I will go from the very earliest one, kind of symbolically, because I had become a member of the Confraternity of St. James by then, which was, in its infancy. So
The difference because the year there was founded one, and it's like a 15 years different, right?
yeah, yeah. Yes, I thought I would start from the place in Europe where the oldest confraternity had been established to help pilgrims. These would have been burghers, men involved, and I doubt whether there were many women, but people who had made the pilgrimage to Santiago, who then, when they got home again, because don't forget, everybody had to walk all the way home again from to wherever, they got together and set up a confraternity to give advice and sometimes financial help to other people who wanted to do the same thing. So that was what a confraternity was all about. A
Okay.
confrérie, no?
Okay. And since you're an historian, do you know at that time, 1120, or around that time, the people that went to Santiago, how many people were by that time? Do you know?
Well, that was the beginning, really, of the very active 12th century. We don't know numbers in the way that we can calculate them now, but there are a very few statistics, one of them being from the monastery of Roncesvalles in the Pyrenees, as you know, which in some account book or other, there is a record of having provided more than 100,000 pilgrim meals in the course of a year. Now, I don't know which year that was, nor whether those were, lunch or dinner or just single meals given to single pilgrims. But you get the idea that there were a lot of people on the road by the end of the 12th century. That would have been later in the 12th century. But Chartres confraternity would have been founded very early in the 12th century. Things were just beginning to get going then. In the
Okay.
11th
Wow.
century, in the 11th century, the infrastructure was still coming together with all these royal decrees giving privileges to the religious houses for taking in and caring for pilgrims, giving them lands and rights, and giving rulers the right to exert tolls in order to pay for facilities for pilgrims. This was all part of consolidating the route that we now know against the Moors whom they had driven back that far. It was part of the Reconquista, the very early phase of the reconquest of territories that had been taken over by the Moors, and they were then being reclaimed. So they had to consolidate all that.
This is really interesting. So then, on that year that you were then going back to 1986, in how many days did it take you the whole route that you were walking?
From Chartres, it took me 10 weeks and 2 days, and I took about 6 or 7 days off during that whole time and walked every other day during that time. So 10 weeks and 2 days. And yeah, I got to.
I mean, 72 days where you were walking 72 days.
Yeah, I walked. I left Chartres on the 30th of March, and I walked into Santiago on the 10th of June. So it was, and that was a great day. It was really a joy to arrive, because I had a lot of rain. Anybody who has read my book, A Hug for the Apostle, which I wrote when I came back home from that journey and published it in 1987. There were no books about the Camino then, very, very few anyway. And the first half of that book was all about walking in pouring rain. It must have, if it bored me, it must have taxed the reader, but I've never had anybody tell me that. It was quite an endurance test just because of the weather. I loved the walking and I loved the countryside. It was a great experience, but the French side of the Pyrenees was very wet that year and very cold.
Wow! And that book, then I was reading some information that book has been like a impact from different people that were reading the book. Do you know how many copies have been sold of the book?
I think the print run was about 8,000 or 10,000 copies, and I know that a book club in the States bought about 2,000, and the rest were all sold in Canada, and it sold out in about 8 months. And I have a copy of it right here. It looks like this, and this is the one. This is the one that you can still buy on Abe.
I see it there. Hug for the Apostle.
Yeah, Hug for the Apostle. Yes. So that was the book about that journey, and it was. I shouldn't probably show you anymore if it's going to be that troublesome. But the book was reprinted in 2019, re-edited and reprinted. So this is the new edition of it. And you can get that from Amazon, I think, and from the publisher in Toronto. So that's what it looked like.
Oh, that's really nice. You say that was reprinted in 2019, right?
Yes, it was re-edited and expanded. It's quite a bigger book than the first one. Has a lot more photographs and info in it, and then it was reprinted. This is a paperback. The other one was a hardback, and anyway, it's very much around. We had some copies in Vancouver, but we sold them all very quickly, which was really nice.
Okay. And that second edition, do you know how many copies has been sold?
I don't. I know the publisher still has them, though. I think the print run of that was about 2,000, and I think maybe he's got, I don't know, 800 and some left. It's sold reasonably well. So,
that's pretty good. I'm happy because all that is happening, and all of that is related to the Camino. So that's amazing.
Of course, yes, absolutely. So,
Okay. And then you have reading other books as well. And
yes.
what are the other books about it that you have read?
Well, about the Camino, this one, which is called Waybread, this is the one that I brought out after the pandemic, which is
Okay.
the book of essays about the Camino that I had given, essays, talks, conference papers, that kind of thing, that I had been asked to give since the 1990s, both here in Spain and in Canada and in the UK. And so I thought my answer to the pandemic was sit down and pull some essays together as a book, and that was it. It's called Waybread, and that's available on Amazon as well.
Okay.
But my as you know, I was lived in London for a long time, and I wrote a lot of corporate history commissions, and one of them, this one, is a great big book about the Prudential. It was the third biggest insurance company in the world then.
Okay.
It took me 5 years to write, and was that was a Camino in itself. And then 6 or 7 other ones. This one was written for the UK Institute of Actuaries about pensions and very difficult mathematical things, which I have no aptitude for, but I had to learn about it. And this is a wonderful thing, the really interesting thing about that line of work is that, you mentioned in the questions, Slaughter and May, that's a legal firm, various, they were all different. And it gave me a wonderful opportunity to learn about completely different fields of professional life and work in the city, and I very much enjoyed that. Each one was a challenge, but very, very, very different. And then finally, not well, finally, but this one was a book I wrote in running up to 2016, and it's called An American Princess. This might be of interest to your readers. It's about an American woman called
Okay.
Marguerite Chapin, and she was a great literary figure, and I felt she should be better known than she ever has been. She was a very generous woman. She was very wealthy, moved to Europe as a young woman, and married a prince who just happened to be a composer as well. And so I thought I would write her biography, and that's An American Princess, the remarkable life of Marguerite Chapin Caetani. And that was, again, something completely different. I enjoyed that immensely. So, and if American readers are curious about her, I would love it if people would read about her, because she's so deserving of real applause. She published so many young writers and did a lot for the literary world of the 20th century. So,
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. So, Pilgrims, if you like reading, so you have plenty of books here that you can start buying around. That way, you start reading her books, about her books. And then, talking something else, that in 1986, and Elias Baliña was alive.
yes.
And then I imagine that Jose Manuel, that is our common friend, at that time was a kid. I believe the kid, probably
Yeah,
9 to
he
10
was.
years old, something like that.
No, he was 19.
Now
No,
19 already.
sorry,
Oh, was not a kid.
no,
So was
he'd have been 16, 15 or 16 in 1986, but I didn't meet him in 1986. I met him in
okay.
1989. I
Okay.
met Don Elias in 1986.
Okay.
And when I got involved in things to do with the Camino, I met him on several occasions after that. And
Okay.
on one of them, he asked if I would be willing to translate a guidebook that he was writing into English. And I said, yes, I would. So
Okay.
I walked to Rome in 1989 from London. And when I got to Rome, I didn't go back to London. I came to Osabrero. And I met him and we sat down and talked about this. He unfortunately was very ill by then, but we worked together on it for as long as he could. And that was the period in which I met Jose Manuel and his whole family, really, and became great friends with all of them. And I still am. They're in part the reason that I live here now, because we are like family. We are family. So that's why he told you that when we were at the conference. That was so funny when you phoned him up,
Yeah.
from the conference hall.
Pues hay un montón de diferencia en la practicalidad, en la realidad de cada uno. Roma y Jerusalén son rutas históricas y son muy interesantes, pero no recibes como peregrina ninguna respuesta de la gente porque han olvidado lo que es la peregrinación. En el Camino de Santiago es todavía este sentido muy vivo y lo que hace el viaje tan especial realmente, que es la alma de la peregrinación, es que la gente que encuentras reconocen lo que están haciendo, lo que estás haciendo y dan respuesta por su modo de tratarte.
Yes, so it was really nice when you were talking and say, "Well, where I know a person that is in common."
Yes,
with us."
yes,
And
because I was speaking about his uncle, Don Elias Valina, and how he rebuilt, how he reconstructed Osobero, which was a ruin when he arrived there in 1959. 30 years later, when he died, he had reconstructed the whole village and revived the Camino and invented the yellow arrow. So my talk in Vancouver was about all of that. It was about his great contribution to the revival of the Camino. So
yes, if he was alive nowadays, he would see it totally different than what he was working on. Now is a reality.
well, yes, it's a reality. I don't know. I think in large part he would be astonished, of course, and very happy. I'm not sure he would be happy about everything, but I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I won't say more about that. But of course, it's very different now when there are hundreds of thousands of people walking to Santiago on 8 or 10 different caminos now, not just the Camino Frances, which was the only one that existed back then. The next one to revive was the Via de la Plata, but that wasn't until the early to mid-90s, really. So the Camino Frances was very much the dominant Camino for more than a millennium.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that was
it's going to
the
be
one that
almost
he knew.
1,000 years. In the next century, it's going to happen like 1,000 years already, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes,
that's nice.
if you think in 2072, it will be 1,000 years since King Alfonso VI of Galicia invited the French Benedictines to come from Aurillac and establish a monastery in Osobero. And there had been a church there even before that.
Wow, how interesting. And then,
Yeah.
what advice, with all that experience that you have and all that knowledge that you have about the Camino, what advice would you tell to pilgrims that are watching us when they have not considered yet the Camino, but they have not made the Camino, walk the Camino, but they would like to walk? What advice would you tell to them?
What advice? Oh, I think, before people have actually walked to Santiago, they should read as much as they can, connect with their local association where they can meet other pilgrims and gain a lot of experience and good advice. There's almost so much information available now. The difficulty is not being overwhelmed by it. But I do think that one particular piece of practical advice is still worth giving. And that is, if you're physically capable of it, carry your own rucksack. Because part of what the Camino gives you is a lot of life lessons. And you learn through the process of getting rid of things, of deciding, oh, I didn't really need that after all, or my golly, that book is heavy. You learn what you can live without, and that is very liberating. That will set you free from slavery to possessions for the rest of your life. And that's a great thing to have. It's a very salutary life lesson, just learning what you can live without. So, I would say, unless you've got a back problem or you've got a respiratory problem or you're 80 years old or whatever, if you can, carry your own rucksack. Don't succumb to get the taxi to carry it for you and just give them, it's a bad bargain. I know it costs only a few euros, but the life lesson you learn is worth far more than that. So I would say that.
Well, yeah. My wife right now, she's walking the Camino, and while we're speaking, and probably when at the time that this is gonna be live, it's gonna be in the past. But my wife is walking right now, and she had never walked the whole Camino Frances. So she started this time in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and she had been telling me that she's in Pamplona, that first part of the Camino is totally different, and the last 100 kilometers of the Camino.
Mm-hmm.
That the first day she said that it was like a forest at some point that you don't know if you can get lost. That part, because it's like everything you see the same.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And
yes, you really need to look for your arrows, and I think they do. They are on the French side. I didn't see them on the French side in 1986, but then I didn't expect to find them until I got into Spain. I had the Spanish Don Elias's first guidebook, the 1985 one. I had that, but I didn't pick it up until Pamplona. So I was kind of blundering along as well. And that is quite a challenging stretch, that Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Roncesvalles, but it's very beautiful, very, very beautiful.
Yeah, that's correct. And also it's the Pyrenees, part of the Pyrenees, so it's not easy.
Yes.
It's not at all easy.
No, and you don't do it in bad weather either. You make sure the weather is going to be good, and you're not going to get a fog coming down or walk into a snowstorm or anything like that. So summer is a nice time to do it.
Yeah. And then after that first Camino that you walk, how many more Camino have you walked?
Well, I've driven a lot of sections of it. The only time, and walked parts of it again, and walked parts of other ones, but the only time I ever redid the whole thing from Roncesvalles was in the year 2001, I guess, when I was chair of the confraternity and realized that it had changed such a lot just in 15 years that I thought I should go back and do the whole thing again, because what I was remembering was very different from what our members were telling about. So I really went back and did it again, just to reacquaint myself with the whole thing. And I did it in November and December, which was not a great time of year to do it, but it was interesting to do it then. And luckily there were many more places to stay, but a lot of them were closed then because it was winter time. So pros and cons of every season, but it depends how much company you want, You're never as alone on the Camino as you may think you are.
Yeah. And there was a snow by that time when you were working on during that time.
Oh, very much so. And by the time I got to Osabrero, there was snow on the ground, and I stopped for a week. And I was here for Christmas, and then I carried on the 26th. I started off again to Triacastella. It was snowy that day, and then I carried on to get to Santiago for the Feast of the Translation on the 30th of December, and I just made it to the Pilgrim Mass. I was thrilled. So it
Wow.
was, I had to really move very, very fast then. But I was
Wow.
fit by then, so that was good.
So because you have walked that during winter time,
Mm.
and then you have walked also during spring and summertime as well.
Yeah, the springtime was the one that I did in 1986, March, April, May, and part of June. But
Okay.
when I walked to Rome, it was summer. I began in London on the 1st of July, on Canada Day, on the 1st of July, and I got to Rome on the 29th of September, which quite coincidentally was my birthday. And then
Okay.
in 1992, I left London on the 16th of September and got to Jerusalem on Christmas Eve, which I had planned and hoped to do. But, over that kind of distance, you can't really be very sure of what you're going to do. I had to take a ferry from Piraeus to Cyprus, and I had to take another one from from Haifa to, from Limassol to Haifa, and then I walked from Haifa to Jerusalem and got there on Christmas Eve, which was really
Wow.
wonderful. I went to midnight mass in the basilica in Bethlehem, which was really an amazing thing to do. That was just fantastic.
Oh, that's an experience to be there on that day.
Yeah, and of course, in 1992, there were tensions, but there was nothing like the terrible goings on now.
Yeah.
I walked with no problem at all, really, and it was, and the Israel MS Society turned out to walk with me. So when I was walking between Haifa and Tel Aviv, I had a great cavalcade of people walking with and behind me with flags flying and a marching band, and it was quite something. Everyone was having a great party.
Wow. What an experience. And then going to all that experience that you have walking and
Mm.
different weather seasons. And what you be your advice if someone wants to walk during cold weather time? Because
Hmm.
the dressing, I'm talking about the dressing that you have, is more heavy if it's for cold weather than it is for spring or summertime.
Of course,
So
yeah.
how do you deal with those things?
Well, you need waterproof and windproof clothing. I think sometimes the windproof is a lifesaver, because if you're wet and it gets really cold and windy, you can get very hypothermic and so on. So you really need windproof garments and something that will go over the lower part of your face, and a hood perhaps. And also, if you're sleeping in albergues, and they're usually enough of them open that you can do that, you need at least a 3-season sleeping bag, if not a 4-season one. Although the albergues will be heated, you just may need something really heavier than you would ordinarily carry. And your boots, of course, have got to be waterproof. So, very much so.
Well, thank you very much
And
for that advice. And
and good gloves, and just common sense things, really. Today's very sophisticated textile fabrics for all weather garments. You go into a really good shop and ask their advice. It's probably far better than mine, because after all, it was a long time ago now. It's 1992, walking in the winter. There's probably things that people can buy now that hadn't even been invented then.
Yeah. And then the other thing, you are from Canada. So for Canada, the weather is cold, really cold there during winter time. Is in the US as well, but not as much as like in Canada.
Yeah, we in Toronto, we have a very cold winter, or can have, but we also have a steaming hot summer. And so I'm very good in heat, actually. I grew up with having to cope with great heat. As a child in Toronto, everybody is able to do that. You just grow up with it. And, so it's a, I suppose having walked in every season, I've seen the contrasts, but my walk to Rome, I had unbelievable heat sometimes, 35 degrees in a
Wow.
place like Switzerland. And you get to a town where there's a fountain in the middle of the main square. I would just go and take my hat, fill it with water, and just plop it on my head. Just, effectively soak myself completely. And nobody ever said, don't do that or anything. I think everyone was amazed to see anybody walking in that kind of temperature. But sun cream is an absolute essential. So
Yeah. It's really
it was.
Yeah. Another question that I have for you, Laurie, regarding your garden. So
Yes.
how that idea came to life?
Well, you may have read that I have created in the garden a replica of the Chartres Cathedral Labyrinth. Maybe viewers who've been to Chartres will have had the good fortune to be there on a Friday, and that's the day that they take the pews off the labyrinth and people can walk it. It's in the floor of the cathedral, but if the pews are on top of it, you might well not notice it. So on Fridays, they take it, they clear all that, and people can walk it. And it's a very beautiful labyrinth design. You may know Christian Labyrinth only has one path, which makes a very complicated route to a center. And then when you get to the center, you follow the same path back out of the labyrinth, but in the opposite direction. And so you cannot get lost in it. It's not like the one at Hampton Court where, monitors have to go and find people who've been lost in it all day. The Christian Labyrinth is a very simple path to a center and then back out again. And mine is a replica of the Chartres Labyrinth because that's where I began my pilgrimage in Chartres Cathedral.
Wow.
And I always wanted to recreate that somewhere. And this is where. And luckily, when I bought this place, I didn't buy it for this reason, but I hadn't been here long before I realized that there was enough space to do it, and that there was a gentle, gentle slope to part of the land that would make it possible to lay out the labyrinth and be able to see the whole design from the entrance point. And I probably could have looked for decades for somewhere like that and never found it. But there it was. So the labyrinth is planted in miniature box, and it means it will never grow higher than about knee height. And so you can see the whole design when you're standing at the entrance to it. So it's not scary at all for kids and people who might have a bit of claustrophobia or something. You can see the whole thing, and you can always just step over the hedge if you suddenly feel you must emerge quickly, So there it is, and it's on the cover of Waybread. I don't know, maybe I can hold this up again. And if I hold the book up again, you may be able to see it in the photograph with my house in the background.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Anyway,
super nice.
yeah. So so there it is. And the idea of a quiet garden, as I say, there are more than 300 of them around the world now. The Quiet Gardens Association in the UK was founded in the 1990s by an Anglican priest. That's an Episcopalian minister, a priest for you. And he had the idea that his parishioners could benefit from just some quiet space where they could go in the course of the day and busy lives and just reflect and meditate and maybe walk a bit if there is somewhere to walk. But quiet gardens don't have to be big. They can be someone's front garden, and there are a number like that around the world. But anyway, it's private space that the owners open to the public. So my garden is, it has a gate that is always open, and people can just drive up and walk in. There are 2 benches out there for them to sit for as long as they like. They can walk the labyrinth if they want to. And on the whole, I don't go out to meet them or anything unless they actually knock at the door and indicate that they want company. But people just go and sit there and drink in the view and collect their thoughts and contemplate and so on for as long as they like. And it's very much it's become a local resource around here. Children come to play in the labyrinth, which is quite fun. Gives me a lot of enjoyment to hear kids playing out there. But mostly people come just to be quiet. It's a quiet garden. And people come for all kinds of reasons. I never ask them their reasons. On the whole, I may see them arrive and leave, but I don't go out there and bother them or anything. They're welcome to be there for as long as they would like to. There are lots of quiet gardens in the United States and in Canada. If you go onto the Quiet Gardens website, just look up Quiet Gardens Association. You can see all the countries where there are quiet gardens, and in your case, all the states where there might be one. And you're welcome automatically to just go to that and visit it. And, it's a worldwide network now.
Well, that's super nice to know. And then pilgrims, you know that how to search for those gardens if you would like to be visiting one of them. And when you are walking the Camino, you know that Laurie has a garden on her house that you can also visit it.
Yes, pilgrims are especially welcome because I believe that the labyrinth is really it's a metaphor. It's a kind of represents the journey of life in the same way that the Camino does, really. And I originally intended it for people who were physically unable to do the Camino. I thought, but they could at least journey a visual and kind of metaphorical space like that and have a kind of journey and reflect on their journey the same way that we do when we're on the Camino. And but the trouble is, it's grown too bushy now to allow for that. It was planted to be wide enough to allow 2 people to walk side by side.
Okay.
But it's grown so much that now it's only one person who can do it. So you have to be at least able-bodied to get round it. You can take your time, but I really had wanted an older person on someone's arm or somebody in a wheelchair to be able to do that and obtain some benefit from that. I thought it's a lovely thing to do in a beautiful natural setting like this. But the pandemic allowed it to grow too bushy because I couldn't get my gardener to come and help me with it because he couldn't cross the provincial boundary when the pandemic was on. That was against the law then. So, and I couldn't do it myself. I'm just not strong enough to prune it and clip it all myself. It has to be done with a hedge cutter. So so that was why its function has now changed a little bit.
Okay, then I have another question, because Garden, the Labyrinth, and the Camino are all very, very related with life.
Mm-hmm.
But then are also related with, because they are related with life, are related with every aspect of your life. And how would you relate that, and with all that experience that you have as a writer and all the institution organization that you have worked for, on a day of work, how would you relate all that experience that someone get into the Camino for then apply to their day-to-day life at work?
Oh my, that's a quite a challenging question. I guess maybe it isn't. The Camino has its ups and downs, its easy sections and its very challenging ones. The way up to Osabrero being one of them, and the times when you think you just can't go any farther, and then you find you can. Times when you really need help and somebody comes along and offers it to you, or even just comes and makes something happen for you that you never foresaw. In the same way, maybe that the Labyrinth has twists and turns and dead ends, and it's the kind of never give up mentality, really. You take a wrong turning and you're not sure what to do. Well, you go back a little way and you see where you should be going. You miss a yellow arrow and you end up in a wood or a forest where you are not sure where on earth the next one is going to be. Well, better go back and just make absolutely sure then that was the way you were supposed to go. And then if it wasn't, well, rectify. Don't get discouraged, I would say, whatever. So if you can certainly translate that into daily life, we all have daily discouragements and moments when you think, my golly, if that phone doesn't stop ringing and that, that person doesn't stop doing whatever they're doing, I'm going to go crazy. Just calmly recollect yourself and maybe transport yourself to some challenging hill on the Camino on a hot day and just think, well, I'm just going to stop for a moment, pull myself together, and then carry on very deliberately, and eventually I will get to the top. I will get to the top. So and you do. And eventually you are able to do whatever it is you need to do, whether it's writing a legal brief or getting through a challenging presentation or digging a big hole. I don't know. It's everything has its challenges and satisfactions. So does that make any sense?
Totally agree with your response. You say it in few minutes. You say a perfect answer. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Okay.
As long as it's a helpful one, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we are almost getting to the end of the conversation, and it's been a really nice conversation. And what other thing you would remind to pilgrims to take care of as a last advice for today's conversation?
I think don't walk plugged into anything. You're on the Camino. Be present at every moment of that, both the difficult ones and the wonderful ones. And all of them, in a sense, are wonderful because each one contributes to you getting where you're going. And the end of the Camino, when you walk into Santiago, that's not the end of your Camino. Your Camino begins there. It's the rest of your life. You walk out of Santiago Cathedral and that's where your Camino begins. You take it home with you and live it. And the joy that you feel, the things that you've discovered, take those home and pass them on, all the wonderful things. I think the spirit of gratitude, because one does experience so much of that on the Camino. Gratitude is to me the essence of the Camino. You find yourself giving thanks for, whatever you're seeing or hearing, whether it's the face of someone you love or bird song, things that you have never noticed before that all of a sudden you do, things you learn. All of that contributes to that wonderful transformative sense of realizing just how much life gives you and how much, too, that you bring to other people's lives and how grateful they are for you, just as you are for them. And I think that's a tremendous source of joy. And just live that, I would say. Just live that. Pass on whatever you bring home and just spread the word in the best possible way by living it. What else is there, really?
Okay. So really nice. So thank you, Pilgrims, for watching us today. And then please keep adding your comments on the comment sections. And for the ones that are not watching us because they are listening at the podcast into other platforms, so thank you as well for being here. And Laurie, thank you again for your time to share with us all that information that you have been giving to us during this conversation. And buen camino, everyone.
Oh, buen camino, everyone. I echo that thoroughly. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Great to talk to you.